Hello, hello, hello. My name is Gatsfurs. Thank you for joining the channel. So today's video, it's in regards to all the characters that you can play in StoneShard, and also all the 3 skills that you're allowed to play at the moment as to patch 6.0.17. Take note that I'm streaming pretty much every day, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Link in the description down below. Please join us. Gonna be amazing if you guys join us. So bear with me. That's gonna be a long video, okay? All the characters, not that much, but all of the skill trees, that's gonna take forever. So if you're just looking for some information on specific trees, don't worry. There's chapter down below. Just click on the one that you want to watch. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, let's start with the characters. Let's start with our first character, Velmir, the latest character in the game. Velmir is strength as a spearman. Obviously spears because he's the only character that starts with the affinity of spears, but also because of his passive. Passive pretty much determine what character is the best at. So because most of the skills, passives, and the stance of spears require to stand still and be stationary, obviously you will get attacked, and Velmir buffs starts when you receive an attack. So therefore, since spears require you to be like a wall and not moving, Velmir is the best character to play spears. He's also decent with range weapon, but like very Velmir is strength, it's spears. So if you plan to play with spears, take Velmir. So our second character is Jorgrim. Jorgrim is currently my favorite character because my favorite spec to play is Axe and Shield, and he starts with Axe and Shield. Jorgrim actually is excellent as a dual wield character because just the fact that he has dual wield, obviously he's a great character to play with sword and axe because he starts with it. But like any melee character, Jorgrim is a great character to start with. His passive is that every time he kills an enemy, he gains 15% weapon damage and 20% crit efficiency for 10 turns. So Jorgrim is just amazing. Stats wise, he's amazing as well in regards to play a melee character. So if you want to play a melee character, Jorgrim is a great pick just for his passive and all the arsenal that he starts with. Every melee character needs to take 2 skills in Combat Mastery. Just go to my Combat Mastery chapter and you'll know why. So Jorgrim, one of the best character to play as a melee character. And our third character, Arna. Arna is amazing. It's a great melee character as well, for the sheer fact that she starts with Combat Mastery. Every melee character needs to have Combat Mastery. And also for her starting equipment and her passive. The passive of Arna works a little bit like the Combat Mastery skills. As soon as she has an enemy within her vision, she has 5% bonus and cooldown duration, which means that our skills come faster. 5% is not the end of the world, but it's still nice. What's nice, however, it's the 5% ability cost reduction. That's pretty freaking nice. And the best is the minus 3% damage taken per enemy in her vision. It's just great. To be honest, it's just great. And she starts with a full plate mail on top of that, with 5 protection. An actual freaking very good armor to start with. It's damage when you start with her. It's around 800 gold to repair it. But with her passive and her armor that she starts right off the bat, she's just amazing. If you want to play a melee character, that's my second pick. Arna, she's just great. I would pick Jorgrim if I would go Axe. But if I would play I do admit that if I play Sword or Mace, am I gonna go lean more for Arna? And definitely, if you play Greatsword, my recommendation, start with Arna. She's by far the best in regards to Greatsword. Just with her starting armor, you know, like Greatsword, you don't have a lot of block at the beginning. You obviously, if you wear a Greatsword, you're not going to be able to use a shield, but because of the armor and her passive, she is by far the best Greatsword character to play with. So if Greatsword is your thing, pick up Arna. If you want to play sword, mace, or daggers, you can choose between both. Obviously, the one that starts with the skills will be easier to play, but any of those, Arna or Jorgrim, they are fantastic to play for melee characters. Dirwin is our fourth character in the game. Dirwin is the best range weapon character, by far. Velgrim is there, but Velgrim doesn't beat Dirwin in terms of just a straightforward passive. When he sees an enemy within this vision, the enemies has 10% minus chance to dodge, which is fantastic, and 10% damage taken for 10 turns. That's just amazing. For a range character, this is the most useful passive. Velmir starts with ranged weapon, but Dirwin's outshine him by far. Dirwin obviously starts with ranged weapon, which makes him a most candidate. Is sharp eye makes him the best in regards to ranged weapon, and his stats also makes him the best as a ranged weapon. Also, if you play a ranged character with ranged weapon, my recommendation is to have 2 sets of weapons, and in my opinion, the best sets of weapon is Dagger. Dagger has a passive skill that's called Quick Hands, and with Quick Hands, what it does is that if your second set of weapon has a dagger equipped in its slot, when you're going to switch for your dagger, it's not going to cost you a turn. So just because of that, Dirwin is the best range weapon character in the game. If you want to play a bow, don't play a crossbow. Just go to my bow and crossbow chapter, you'll know why. But if you want to play a bow, range weapon character, Dirwin is your pick. And our fifth and last character is Jonna. Jonna, she's the character to play if you want to play a caster. Right now, there's only Pyromancy and Goemancy. Just by the sheer fact that she starts with the affinity makes her the best pick, obviously, just by the affinity. And also, just for the straightforward fact of her passive, every time she learns a spell, she gains 2% magical power. She's the only character that has magical power as a passive, therefore she's the one. As I just mentioned, in affinity wise, she has the Geomancy and the Pyromancy, so best pick for that. And she has staff. Obviously, when you're playing a Pyromancy or a Geomancy character, if you're not picking up a staff, you're doing it wrong, especially if you're a Geomancer. And just for her stats, so starting with 14 willpower, it's just amazing. So now, let's talk about stats a bit, okay? Strength, agility, perception, vitality, and willpower. Obviously, if you just highlight them, I'm not gonna state the obvious. If you highlight the stats, it's gonna tell you what it's gonna affect. But take note of something. Your skill tree, take note of checking what increase the damage. For example, if you pick up daggers, you will notice that daggers modifier is increased by strength or agility. So take note of what your ability does, and also to choose the best stats to level up when you level up. My recommendation for you guys, obviously, like I'm not going to state the obvious here, just read that, but if you go to the StoneShard wiki page, they actually managed to get the information of the percentage that is attributed per stats. For example, if you use daggers, daggers are affected by strength and agility. However, agility, if you look at the information on the wiki page, you see that agility actually increases more the damage of daggers. So just take a note when you're going to pick up a tree to play. Look at on the wiki to see which stats affects the most, and it's going to help you tremendously. So let's start with our first weapon. Well, weapon slash skill tree. Kind of sort of talk about both in here. Sword. Not my favorite. However, it's a good weapon and a good skill tree. And also it can be dual wielded fine. So, sword has a low armor penetration. It has no armor damage, which is kind of its flaws, and can have some decent body part damage on some sword. Sword has the best bleeding in the game. With its talent tree, it also has good passives. It has a good stand, and it has one move that does an AoE, which is fantastic. It has one of the best charge in the game. However, it lacks on high damage power. So to talk about the tree, obviously your first skill has the AoE damage. It's a decent skill, lacking damage like I just mentioned, but overall it's a great skills. I'm not gonna go in extensive of all the passive here, but basically the passives of the goods of the sword skill is actually good, which gonna make you do a lot of bleedings to the enemy. Your on rush is one of the best charge attack in the game, extremely useful against the troll. So therefore swords, it's a very good weapon for killing the troll. So sword, it has the highest bleeding damage in the game, which makes it very good, and also has its biggest flaws. Because of sword is too much reliant on bleeding itself and has no armor damage, the moment that you face something that cannot be bled, you will have a hard time. So the moment that you start to face skeletons, you will see the downside of swords. However, if you fight anything else that can be bled, you will destroy everything because of your bleeding damage. It's just gonna be amazing. Sword is a good talent tree. It's just not my favorite because of the lack of well, because it infenses too much on bleeding. So when you fight skeleton, it's your downwards. But however, it's a great tree. So if swords are your thing, you did not pick a bad spec. It's a good spec. Everything in swords tree is good. When you play with swords, on your weapon you will focus on energy drain for the enchantment, and also you will have to focus on pain resistance and bleeding resistance, because your fight's gonna be, it can be quite long, especially when you're gonna fight versus skeletons. But however, one of a great tree in the game. The second weapon tree that we're gonna talk about today, it's the axe. The axe right now is by far the strongest melee weapon in the game. If you picked up axe, you will just do amazing. Axes are the best melee weapon in the game because they have good armor penetration, they have good armor damage, and they have the best body part damage. Axes still have good bleeding because of its first skills. It has great passives. It have a great stance. Downfall is that it doesn't have any AoE attack, but that's okay. It has a charge move. It is the shortest charge move in the game, but nonetheless it has a charge move, which why it's making one of the best, well, the best melee weapon in the game. And it has very high power damage. So axes, just your first move. Your first move is just amazing. It's a charge attack. It has body part damage, like you're gonna have like something like 140% of body part damage, and you have a good chance on bleeding on top of that. So one of the reasons why Axes is so good is just because of his first skills. It does everything. You're gonna charge towards the enemy and therefore gain sort of the initiative because you land the first blow, and you're pretty much sure that you will break something on the enemy, which will give you an advantage, and on top of that, there's a high chance it's gonna bleed. When you start with Axe and you do your mutilating launch, the first enemy you will encounter, they're gonna start the fight like with 68% health left. You're gonna start the fight, you're gonna do 32% damage of their health. First shot. This fight starts, they have a broken limb, they're bleeding, and they are at 68% life left. So, Axes are amazing just because of the amount of body part damage and damage it does, okay? Even though the swords does slashing damage and the axe also does slashing damage, and having a hard time versus skeleton, Axe doesn't fall in this category because of the sheer amount of body part damage that you're doing. Even though the enemy cannot be bled, you can break the arm of a skeleton. And just by doing all of these debuffs on the enemy makes the axe itself amazing. It can perform... It performs extremely well against anything, which is the reason why it's the best weapon in the game. And let's just take a focus in regards to execution. Take note that actually execution does not work on the troll. I don't know, they just like made it unavailable. It's just not applicable to the troll. But once you have execution, no matter how much enemies there is around you, you just don't care, because like at 40, somebody that is, for example, you killed like 2 people and now you have like 30% weapon damage because you're playing Jorgrim, okay? When you're gonna hit your execution, you're gonna kill people at 40% health left, and you're gonna one-shot them. And the reason why execution is so good and makes the hack so good is that if you read the last sentence of execution, which means that if you kill the target with execution, you will gain 35% energy back. And also, side note, if you play axes on your weapon, you will focus to enchant it with energy drain again, and strongly still suggest to focus on pain resistance and bleed resistance for your character when you play axe. It's gonna help you tremendously. But having a 7% energy drain that scales with the amount of damage that you do, because it's 7% of the damage that you do. So often when you're going to do execution on somebody that's going to die through execution, you will actually earn more energy before you land the blow. So yeah, for example, you have 65, you're going to do execution, you're going to have 75. So your execution gets free. It's a free skills. And on top of that, if you enchant your weapon with energy drain, you will earn more energy. So you can execute people at will. It's just the cooldown reduction, obviously. The cooldown's gonna stop you from chain spamming this. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why axes are the best, and execution is just a great skill, because no matter how many enemies you're gonna face with execution, you're gonna pop them super easy. So if you want to play a melee character, axes is the best. And our third weapon slash weapon skill tree that we're talking about today, it's maces. Maces is the worst melee weapon in the game. A lot of people is gonna argue with me in regards to that, but let's just talk about sheer performance. Maces are not performing that great. The worst thing you can do with maces actually right now is to dual wield them, because the base maces in the game has a lot of fumble chances, which is why it's making them one of the worst weapons in the game. Because all of the maces that have interesting stats and interesting damage and interesting bonuses also have a large amount of fumble, which make maces pretty weak, to be honest. And the worst thing you can do, like I just said, dual wielding them, because right now the stats on the maces does not stack together. People before were taking maces with high chances to stun, and they were dual wielding those maces, but now the stun chances does not stack anymore. So therefore they are awful at dual wielding, and the best maces has a high chance of fumble, and when you dual wielding you're increasing your natural chance of fumble, so therefore you're just gonna fumble all the time. So it's the worst melee weapon in the game right now. So maces do have a good armor penetration. However, it can have a good armor damage or a good body part damage, but they cannot have both. So you either have armor pen and armor damage or armor pen and body part damage. So that's one of the reasons why they perform so awfully. They have the worst bleed in the game. They practically, you're never gonna bleed anybody with this weapon. That's due to the fact that instead of bleeding the enemies, they have a chance to daze and stun. So that's the plus. So the Mace talent tree has a decent passive. It has a good stand. The stand is good for the maces. It has no AoE and has no charge attack neither. So that's one of the reasons why it's one of the worst weapons in the game. And it also lacks in high power damage. Some people's gonna tell me that it's false, that the hit has high damage because of finish off, but the thing is that you're not stunning and dazing enemies every single time that you hit. Okay, it's not something that's gonna happen always. So the sheer fact that you're considering your chances to stun an enemy and so forth, and also like the enchantment that you're gonna waste on trying to have more stun on your weapon and stuff like that, just make it, it's just awful. It's just awful. It's not a high damage build. Daze and stun sounds amazing, but it's awful when you're facing several enemies. Since you lack of high power damage, your fight will be prolonged and put you in danger. So you're not hitting very hard. Yes, you can daze one target or stun one target, but when you have 3 or 4 people on you, the fight's gonna take so much time that it's gonna put you in danger. So also one of the reasons why it's the worst weapon, I've already mentioned it, it's because all of the maces that has good stats all have fumble. So just because of that, don't take maces, to be honest. Like, if you want a challenge, sure, go ahead, knock yourself out. Try to go maces, but maces, if you consider them versus sword or greatsword or axes or even dagger, they underperform all of those skill trees. If you still plan to play maces, I'm still recommending to put energy drain on your weapon to enchant it, and again, still focus on pain and bleeding resistance. It's the best for melee characters. And our fourth weapon that we're gonna talk about today, it's the daggers. The daggers are the best dual wield weapon in the game right now, and they are the best second set weapon to use in the game right now. Second set weapon because of quicken. When on your second set weapon you switch to a set that has a dagger, it will not cost you a turn to switch to your second set of weapon. So therefore daggers is amazing for a bowman. Having daggers with quicken as a bowman means that once the enemies are close combat to you, so you can just switch to your weapon and defend yourself. Daggers has a low armor pen, it has no armor damage, and has a low body part damage on some daggers. Even though with those stats, daggers are still performing extremely well. They have a great bleeding, they have great passives, they have a good stance, they don't have AoE, neither a charge attack, but they have high power damage. So all of the dagger themselves all have interesting stats. They are actually great at dual wielding. They are actually the greatest dual wielding weapon in the game as of right now. For example, if you looking to play a naked build that we refer to in the game with Berserker tradition in the dual wield tree, daggers will outshine anything else in the game because of his high damage, high crit chance, high crit damage, and having a lot of dodge chance and a lot of counter attack. These are the best weapon to use as a dual wield naked build with Berserker tradition. So as I've mentioned, daggers are also the best weapon to have as a second set of weapon. So if you're playing a bowman, just take daggers. The only skill that you need with daggers, if you play a bowman, it's double lunge and quick hand, and you're set. And just invest 2 skill points in those, and it's gonna tremendously help. The rest of the talent tree of daggers is pretty interesting. They have the deadly trick, which is a pretty good skill. The deadly trick actually works against the troll, so you can confuse the troll when you use deadly trick on him. Sadly, one of the skill that is amazing with daggers is the counter attack mastery. However, it's irrelevant against the troll. You never counter attack the troll, so that kind of sucks. But for dungeoning, daggers with counter attack mastery, it's amazing. And sadly, the coup de grâce doesn't work on the troll. You don't get the amount of damage that you usually get against enemies when you're dungeoning. But the rest of the tree, everything is good, except from the shadows. Don't take from the shadows. You can take all of the rest of the skill tree, but do not spend a single skill point from the shadows. The game does not have really stealth abilities as of right now, and yeah, don't bother. As of this patch, don't bother taking that skill tree, I mean. The rest you can take everything is fantastic. I do admit that Gaping Wound seems to not be so useful, to be quite frankly honest, but it's still a great way. It's still a great it's an opportunity skill. When the opportunity presents itself, it's super awesome. But the thing is, the reason why it's not that great, it's because usually you're gonna kill the guy before you start to use Gaping Wound. So, too much damage. And to focus on enchantment for daggers, compared to all of the other builds, actually for daggers, in order to be super successful with them, you need to enchant your dagger with damage bonus. My recommendation is Caustic. If you can enchant your dagger with Caustic, it's going to be amazing. And if you're dual wielding daggers, enchant both of them with Caustics. You can choose whatever, if you prefer ice, fire, whatsoever. Personally, I prefer Caustic because there's nothing that can resist really Caustic in the game. So it's an all-around good stats damage for the entire game. And again, since you're a melee character, focus on pain resistance and bleed resistance for the rest of your enchantment. And our 5th skill tree that we're going to talk about today is Greatsword. Greatsword, I consider Greatsword as the second best weapon in the game. It's the second best weapon in the game. It's just amazing. So Greatsword has good armor pen. It doesn't have armor damage, but it has good body part damage. But as their counterpart for swords, because they, in terms of stats wise, they are pretty similar. Greatsword will struggle at the same place as Sword would. However, it will replace and outshine Sword because of its high power damage that it has. So Greatsword has low bleeding chances. Not that it's not something that focus on bleeding, but it focus on high damage. It has decent passive. It has a decent stand. It's the best melee AoE weapon in the game as of right now. And it has the best charge attack in the game. The charge attack becomes the best once you apply the courage passive to your heroic charge. When you apply the passive, it's just because the reason why we're saying that it's the best is because of the sheer amount of damage that, it does, but it needs the passive in order to go toes to toes with onrush of the sword build, because when you have the passive, it increases the charge, it increases the range of your ability by 1 tile, which makes it toe to toe with the sword skills. But the damage output that heroic charge makes it the best charge skill in the game. And as I've just mentioned several times already, it has high damage output. So, Greatsword. Greatsword is fun. It's powerful. You feel like a tank that do output damage. No matter the amount of enemies around you, you just don't care. You just don't care. With the arc cleave, you're gonna burst through everybody. It's just amazing. It does a truck ton of damage. With the skills, you can still have a high chance to block with your parries and do counter moves and all that stuff. I have to say, even though you're not having a shield, the way that Greatsword is built, it's no problem. It's no problem at all. You will perform fantastically with Greatsword. For Greatsword, I still recommend again to focus on energy drain for your weapon, especially due to the high power damage that you have. It means that you're gonna regenerate a lot more energy from your hits. And because it's a melee build, still focus again on enchanting the rest of your items with pain resistance and bleeding resistance. And the next weapon tree that we're going to talk about is spears. So spears are the best melee range weapon in the game right now, because it's the only one. Straightforward as that. It's the only melee weapon that can attack 2 squares beside you. So spear has good armor pen. However, it can have good armor damage or good body part damage, but not both. Actually, there's only one weapon that has both. It's a decent weapon, it's the Gizarm, but it's the only spears that has all 3 stats. The rest, it's either good armor damage or good body part damage. So spear has decent bleeding, but the strength of that weapon, it's really to immobilize or knocking back your enemies. It has great passives. It has a decent stand, but it requires you to standing still, which I don't really like. But it's a decent stand. It doesn't really have AoE attack, but it has one technique that hits 2 enemies in front of you. And that technique is Impaling Launch. It has no charge skills, but it has good damage. The reason why I mentioned that it has great passives and decent stands, it's because Spears has the greatest passive in the game. When you crit, you do 4% equal to the current target health in damage. This is the only high damage skill that actually works. As for melee character, mages have some skills that can do a truck ton of damage. But as for melee, only spears, when they crit, that they can do a lot of damage to the troll. I did a 420 damage on the troll with a crit. So spears are actually good, but for some reason they struggle a lot when you fight a high number of enemies. On one-on-one, you will perform fantastically. You will defeat anything on one-on-one with a spear. But where his strength lies, and this is where I also feel like it's downfall, it's the play style that when you play with the spears, that you need to be standing still to have your bonuses. So your bonuses come from Pikeman stand, that when you're standing still, it prolonged the amount of turn that the effect will have. The stand itself, for the bleeding chance, the damage, the knockback, the immobility chance, it's quite nice. However, I feel like the fact that you need to standing still to have advantage to this, it's not great. And the other techniques that helps you, again, when you're standing still, it's no retreat. Increases your block chance, it increases your crit chance, and it gives you a bonus for your cooldown duration. So where his strength lies, it's also his weakness, in my opinion. But I'm just not a fan about it. It's not a bad weapon, it's a good weapon, it's a good tree. But I personally, in terms of performance, there are weapons that performs a lot better than spears. Example, axe and greatsword, they outshine spears in terms of performance. And again, for your enchantments, if you play with spear, I would still recommend to go with energy drain on your weapon. It's just super useful. And again, bleed and pain resistance for the rest of your enchantments. Range weapon, our next skill tree. I'm gonna start right off the bat by saying the following. Bows are the best, crossbows are the worst. If you play a range character specialized tree and you're using crossbows, you're doing it wrong. If you play a ranged weapon character, choose bow. Bow outshine crossbows by a mile. The only reason why you would use a crossbow is as a second set of weapon, and that reason is because of its low accuracy penalty. But as you level up your character, you will increase your perception, and at some point bows will simply out DPS any crossbow in the game. So if you use a crossbow for a second set weapon, it's perfectly fine. You can if you want to. There's a lot of people playing Velmir with spears and crossbow, that's fine. My recommendation for that is simply don't spec any points in your crossbow. Don't spec anything in range weapon if you're using crossbow. Just try to buy the crossbow that has the lowest amount of accuracy. Like level 7, you can have a crossbow that has a minus 25% accuracy. Enchant them with a 5% accuracy bonus on it, and you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be able to rely on your crossbow a bit. But as I've mentioned already several times, if you play range weapon, skill tree, bow, not crossbows. And also, as I've mentioned in my dagger build, if you play a bow, strongly suggesting as your second set of weapon to dual wield daggers, and the only thing that you need to buy for those to be able to help you tremendously, it's the double launched and the quick hand. That's all you need. These two skills, that's it, you're set. So bow has a decent armor penetration. It has no armor damage. However, there's only one bow in the game. It's a curve bow, it's a endgame bow that has armor damage on it. And some bows can have some decent body part damage. Bows itself has good bleeding. Just by performing a crit on an enemy, you can infect your enemies with bleeding. So, good bleeding on bows. Bows have good passive, however, they have a very poor stand. The reason why the stance is poor right now is because suppression, the only way to increase the duration is by performing a knockback on the enemy. And to be quite frankly honest, if you try to focus on knockback on your bow, you're kind of doing it wrong. You need to focus on like positioning and high power damage, not on knocking back your enemies. And it's too much like if random chances, so therefore like the only reason why I use suppression in the game, it's when I literally have nothing to do. Like I know I turn a corner and I know that the next turn the enemy is going to be there and I have plenty of energy, I'm like, okay, alright, I'm going to pop suppression. But beside that, barely use suppression. So it has a AoE-ish technique. It's your piercing shot. Your piercing shot can pierce through all of the enemies in a straight line. So yeah, it's kind of an AoE attack. Piercing shot will shine in dungeoning. You can like use your distract shot to bail away from a combat and then just like drag all of the enemies to a doorway and wait for them to be a good beautiful line, and then you pierce shot all of them at once. It's a great tactics. It's by far the strongest tactics for bowmans, using distracting shot for repositioning and trying to position your enemy for piercing shot. You're gonna save like a bunch of energy fighting and a bunch of arrow, and you will do a good amount of damage to a bunch of enemies. So yeah, therefore bows have good damage. So bow has good damage and good mobility with distracting shot. Actually, it's one of the best, well actually the best, to be quite frankly honest. It's a mobility moves that also has a chance to perform damage. It's the only mobility skill that does that has a chance to damage. The only other one, it's from athleticism and it's dash, and you cannot do any damage with dash. So therefore it's the best mobility move in the game. So the reason why I mentioned that crossbows are the worst and bow are the best is because when you're gonna level up your character, obviously as a bowman you will increase your perception. One extra note to learn about perception is that at perception level 15, when you have 15 points in perception, it's going to increase your range of vision by 1 and your range of attack by 1. And then it's 25, and then it's 35, and then it's 45, and so forth. So usually as a ranged weapon, I usually get 25 perception, which means that I'm attacking 2 extra square further away, which is great, but also means that my accuracy is greatly increased. And when you hit high accuracy, you're not gonna spend all of your moves to take aim. Once you hit like a solid 65 accuracy on your bow, you can just like start spamming shooting your arrows, and your chances to hit, it's pretty darn good. Near the end of your spec, you will not use taking aim systematically for that particular reason. So at some point, you will earn the skill called Precision. I cannot highlight it there, so I'm just going to click here. So when you get Precision, you will have a buff when you're going to do Taking Aim. And with Taking Aim, it gives you for 2 turns, 10% crit chance and 25% accuracy. So even if you don't have exceptional precision from your Taking Aim, bows will still do a lot more damage than crossbow, just by the sheer amount of arrows that you can shoot in 1 turn versus the crossbow that shoots an arrow, crank it, shoots an arrow, crank it. Bows, you shoot, 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 shoot. And it's just gonna outshine the crossbows just because of that. Not just because of precision, just because of your amount of perceptions that you will get as a ranged weapon character. At some point, you're taking aim, you're gonna use it just to buff yourself and not to be able to hit your target. So again, for bows, I still recommend energy drain because bow are pretty energivore. The bows cost, most of your bows that does good damage, the downside is that the skill cost is extremely high on those weapons. So obviously, again, in your enchantment, focus on energy drain on your bow. It's going to help you tremendously. And technically speaking, you're not supposed to get hit so much as a bowman. So for the rest of your enchantment, try to balance things off. Usually when I play a bowman, I try to be a good dodger and a decent counterattack for my melee hits. Because when I'm getting into melees, that's the worst. So I'm trying to get out of this as soon as possible and then switch back to my bow and do distracting shot and so forth. So for the rest of your enchantment, do whatever you want. For your daggers, I would still recommend your daggers to have an enchantment for damage. Caustic, +7. Is it 7 or 8? I don't remember. But increasing your daggers with caustic damage will greatly help you. For the rest of your equipment, just enchant where you think that you're lacking. If every time you're getting hit, you're bleeding, will increase your bleeding resistance, and so forth. And our next weapon tree is Shield. Shield is your greatest defense for any melee character. Shield will make you literally be a tank and increase your survivability by a lot. So I'm not gonna do a review for shields in terms of damage dealing. I'm only gonna do a review in terms of shields in regards to defensive standpoint, because shield is a lot more reliable in terms of defensive compared to a dodge build with Berserker Tradition. So most of you that will play with shield, I know that there are some people that likes to play a dual wield shield and spec the entire tree. I've never done that personally. I should give it a shot, but here are the 3 skills that I suggest you to pick for your shield, for your melee characters. As I've mentioned, most of you are going to pick up shields, not going to be as for damage dealing, but as a sort of second set of weapon. You're going to play axe and shield, sword and shield, mace and shield, and so forth. And therefore, you're going to focus on your skill tree with your weapon, and shield skill tree is just going to be something to add up to help you survive more. So the 3 skills that I recommend you to use is Raise Shield, and then Shield Bash, but actually do not use Shield Bash. You just spec in it to have access to Retaliation. Retaliation, what it does is that when you block, you have 20% chance to perform a Shield Bash when you block. So in combination with Raise Shield, that increase your block chance for 2 turns, it means that free hit. So these 3 skills, Raise Shield, Shield Bash, and Retaliation, are the 3 skills that you should be taking. Don't go any further down the list. You don't really care. Maybe in the future, when the game you're going to be able to level 20, it could be amazing to increase shield, but as of the game is played right now with the content that it has, just take these 3 skills. It's going to be amazing. Some of you is going to talk to me about defensive stance, that it sounds good, but to be quite frankly honest, there's better than defensive stance. So our next build, it's staff. I'm gonna be honest here. The way that the game is played and the current content in the game, staff is not really meant to do a lot of damage. There's not a lot. I think like the best damage staff you can have, it's like a metallic staff or something like that. It's a low tier weapon, to be quite frankly honest. So as of the game is right now, I did not try to do a full-on staff build due to just the sheer amount of staff damage that there is in the game. Staff are more oriented in terms of spellcasters and increase the spellcaster magical powers and so forth. So therefore, as a mage, obviously you will use staff because staff is the best weapon you can have as a spellcaster. It will increase your spell power, it will decrease your spell cost, and it will decrease your cooldown duration. So it's amazing. So therefore, if you plan to play a mage, the only skill that you actually really need is Hell of Blows, and even there doesn't really need that. Like there's some spells that will help you a lot more than Hells of Blows, but it's not a bad skill to have, Hells of Blows. And if you go Hells of Blows, the only other skill that I would see you get, it's a Step Aside, because it's a charging move, and having a charge move versus the troll, it's actually useful. Not exactly necessary, but it can help you a lot. And our next build, Dual Wield. Dual Wield, it sounds awesome. but it's absolutely not at the moment. It's not awesome at all. This talent tree right now could be considered more interesting once we have more content into the game. Once we can actually fight another boss, like at level 20 or something like that. That's where this talent tree might gonna be useful. But if you simply plan to do a dual wielding spec build, it's wrong. It will so much underperform compared to anything else that straightforward a dual wielding tree, it's worse than the Mace. But of course, if you want to change and a challenge, go knock yourself up and try it that tree. But I've tried it and I can tell you it's pretty awful. It's pretty awful because it's simply sheer lack of damage. Like Flurry of Blows on a level 15 character with like 28 strength, when you're gonna hit the troll with Flurry of Blows, actually you will receive 0 damage. So pretty useless, huh? My only recommendation, if you play a naked build, I've already mentioned that in other builds. If you want to play a high dodge, counter, crit chance, and all that stuff, there's only one way to use this build. It's with Berserker Tradition. For every piece of armor that doesn't have protection on you, obviously except the cloak, the belt, and jewelry, you're gonna get more dodge chance, more crit chance, and more crit efficiency. There's the hand efficiency because as the moment that you take 2 weapons, it increases your chance to fumble and also lowered your weapon damage. So if you want to play a build, if you want to play a dodge build, the only viable option that you have right now is play dual wield with Berserker Tradition. And the only skill that you will take in the dual wield tree, it's Berserker Tradition, and maybe Flurry of Blows could be nice. But the rest, don't even bother. Just use these 2 skills and do your dodge, counter, high crit chance, and all that stuff build. These are the 2 only skills you're gonna need from that tree. The rest is pretty much irrelevant. I'm not even gonna cover it right now because it performs awfully right now. And our next skill tree is Combat Mastery. Combat Mastery has some pretty nice skills in it. However, we will talk about the 2 most important skills to take in Combat Mastery for any melee character build that you're gonna play. Any melee character build that you will play will always use these 2 skills, and here they are. These 2 skills are Seize Initiative and Defense Tactics. Why, would you ask? Seize Initiative is a melee hit that you perform on an enemy, and as long as this enemy is alive, you will have this buff, which is accuracy, fumble, cooldown duration, and ability cost duration, and the target will have the debuff, the same equivalence as you, except for the accuracy is changed for dodge, as a debuff. So as long as this target is alive, you will have Seize Initiative. So if you fight 4 people, take the strongest, do Seize Initiative on him, and then kill all of the low-level character or the weakest character. And during this entire time, you will have this buff. It's amazing. And Defense Tactic works that as long as you have 1 enemy in your vision, you will have Defense Tactics. So if the fight stands for 100 turns, just 1 click, and for 100 turns, you will have Defense Tactic. Therefore, when you fight the troll, you hit the troll once, Seize Initiative, you do your Defense Tactic once, and that's it, you forget about it. You have all the buffs for the entire fight. And Defense Tactics, I'm not gonna read the entire things, but basically what it means is that the more enemies that you have around you, the more stacks that you can have, up to 5, and these stacks increase your block chance, which is the reason why I said in the shield build that there's better for Defense Tactic. It's this one. Because the defense and shield doesn't increase your chance to block, it only increases your block power, where here it increases your chance to block by 4% per stacks, on top of having 5 fortitude, which we don't really care, but what is very nice is the 3.5 minus damage taken. And it increases your blood, your stun, and your knockback resistance. It's just amazing. And on top of that, every time you're gonna block, you're gonna regen 4% energy. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. You're just gonna click that once and it's gonna help you tremendously. These two skills gonna make you stand still against a large amount of enemies or a strong foe for the entire fight. So if you play a melee character, Seize Initiative and Defense Tactics are the best skills to get. In regard to the rest of the tree, I'm not gonna cover the entirety of the tree. There's a lot of nice skills. For example, the Thirst for Battle or the War Cry is pretty nice. There's some nice skills in that tree. However, it's kind of a bit like the Dual Wield. Combat Mastery tree is a lot better than the Dual Wield one, but still, you will not perform as well if you go full-on Combat Mastery compared to if you go like full-on Axes. Your performance is going to be a lot better. So my recommendation for now, as the game is, just pick up Seize Initiative and Combat Tactics in that tree and leave the rest for future content. Our next tree skill is Athleticism. I'm gonna be quite frankly honest, I'm not a fan of Athleticism right now. It's another tree that will be useful once we hit higher level and so forth. However, if you look at the tree and look at all the skills, you're gonna find them amazing and you're gonna think that it's super awesome and super useful, but it's not. Okay? Your damage will be outperformed by tenfold from any weapon. Even maces will perform better if you go full on athleticism. If you go deep into athleticism, it's gonna dumb down your character and you're gonna be less performant compared that if you actually spec into daggers, greatsword, and so forth. It's gonna help you a lot more. Like I've said already, this is a tree that's gonna be amazing once we have higher level content. And now, Pyromancy. Pyromancy is the most powerful tree in the game. There's nothing that beats Pyromancy. Pyromancy is straightforward, the highest type of damage that you can output in the game. A Pyromancer level 8 with the right skill will obliterate the troll. Obliterate it. It's the most powerful skills tree that there is in the game right now. There are no other tree skills that can perform as well as the Pyromancy one. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Pyromancy. The tree at the beginning, it's kind of hard. There's a lot of kiting involved when you start to play Pyromancy. It's your only survival tool. It's to kite your enemies. What you're gonna have to do is you're gonna shoot your fire barrage, and then you're gonna kite away the enemies until your cooldown is back, and do a fire barrage again, and then kite the enemies again, and shoot your fire barrage again until he's close quarter to you, and then you have no opportunity to run, and you just use your fire ring, and you hope that he dies as soon as possible. So the beginning of Pyromancy is kind of hard. It's not hard when you don't mind kiting. As long as you're gonna kite, you're gonna be super successful, but it's a bit boring. But every time you're gonna earn a new spell, your power will drastically increase. So in Pyromancy, all the skills are actually good. However, there are two skills that I would recommend not picking up and focusing to go further down the trees. And those two skills are Baptism by Fire. You're not gonna get a lot of fire damage in the game, so therefore it's by far the least useful passive that you can get on this tree. The second skill that I would suggest to forgo, it's Flame Saturation. Even though you will ignite a lot of enemies, and the minus 20% spell cost on your skills sounds pretty interesting, it's kind of a bit useless because you're gonna obliterate things so fast anyways that you will be able to sit down and rest. So don't bother, to be honest. The reason why I also not recommend to pick them up, it's because, as I've mentioned several times in this video, due to the amount of content there is in the game. Like I said, like a level 8 Pyromancer will obliterate the troll, which means that in dungeon, you're just gonna be running and tossing fireball left and right and magma rains and melting rays and all that stuff, and everything's gonna die. So it's gonna get a bit boring. You're just gonna be like too powerful. You will be literally a god amongst peasant. So the moment where you will peak and shine the most is the moment that you will get melting rays. The reason why melting rays is so good is because it's a range attack and it's a AoE attack on top of that. And the reason why it's so good and it's gonna leash a lot of damage is because it's a guaranteed ignition on your target. The enemies around it has a very small chance to ignite, but the target will ignite. And when a target is ignited, you can use incineration. So you're gonna do melting ray, and then you're gonna do incineration, and all the enemies in front of you is gonna have a tremendous amount of damage on them. And then you're gonna use magma, and then you're gonna use magma rain, and magma rains is a 3x3 square that's gonna put a bunch of fire there, and the enemies are either stuck in it or they're gonna move around it, which is gonna give you even more time to use your fire barrage or try to use your blaze or do another melting rays and then incinerate them and burn them. You're just gonna destroy everything, okay? So the moment that you get melting rays and magma rain, melting ray is gonna do a shit ton of damage. Magma rays, you're gonna block the entrance of the enemies to reach you. So if you're in front of a door and you start to fight them, you just put the magma rain right in front of you, and the enemies gonna either step on it and get a shit ton of damage and put them in a bad position, or they're just gonna wait there for the magma rain to be removed. So it gives you more time to shoot fire barrage or blaze or melting rays, and you're just gonna destroy everything. So my recommendation for enchantment for Pyromancy on your weapon, actually put magical power, because yeah, it's the best that you can pick. And then I would enchant all of my stuff with energy restoration, because your fight will never be very long. You will obliterate everything. So by having energy restoration, instead of sitting down to regen your mana, you're just gonna be able to run, and next fight you're gonna be full of mana, and it's gonna help you in fights for the troll. The fight for the troll is gonna stand a little bit longer, but if you have energy restoration, you're just gonna obliterate him pretty much. So power and energy restoration, that's all you need for a Pyromancer. And our final build, Goemancy. So I think that Goemancy, to be quite frankly honest, is the most fun build that I've ever played in StoneShard. It requires a fair amount of skills to play that build, and it's kind of hard to master it. And it's going to be hard to survive at the beginning. But once you start to have a few skills in that tree, it's just going to become amazing. So I'm just going to start right away with the enchantments and the stats that you need for Goemancy. Compared to all of the other builds, Goemancy is very on a different page. So your best stats for Goemancy is actually cooldown duration. If you can have 75% cooldown duration, it's going to make your boulder to be on a 1 turn cooldown duration. And then the second best enchantment that you can have, it's a spell reduction cost. That's your second best. So as a Geomancer, actually, one of the best staff that you can have, it's the staff that you find at the Witch Hut, because that staff has a lot of cooldown duration and a lot of spell cost reduction. So that's going to help you tremendously. And the rest of the enchantment, I would go with energy restoration, because this tree is extremely energy war. which is the reason why you try to have the staffs that gives you a lot of spell cost reduction and equipment that gives you a lot of spell cost reduction. There's some helmets that does that, there's a robe that does that, and so forth. So try to focus on that. And that's where the build will shine. If you manage to get your runic boulder to a 1 cooldown duration, you're gonna be able to stun lock the enemies non-stop. So where Pyromancy shine in a high amount of damage, Goemancy shine in crowd controlling. You're not gonna be doing a lot of damage. Your fight will always be longer compared to anything else, even longer than Mace's. However, the crowd control ability that you have with this build is 100 times better than the stun from the Maces. You will be able to fight at 2 different fronts with this build and crowd control everything and destroy everything. So Goemancy will shine during dungeoning. You will literally think that you are invincible. However, when you're gonna hit your first wall, it's when you're gonna fight the troll. Troll has a high crushing resistance, and most of your damage in this build is crushing resistance. There's some arcane damage as well, but most of the damage is crushing. So this is where you're gonna have a hard time to kill the troll. Obviously, there's some people you will see on the internet, some people that fight the troll at level 10 with the Geomancer and fight the troll and defeat him. But what they do, it's super duper boring. The only thing that they're using is the runic boulder. They try to have like 3 or 4 runic boulders to have the 7.5 damage taken reduction 4 or 3 times. And then they're gonna use the runic boulder as well to try to keep up the stone armor, and they're just gonna whack the troll with their staff non-stop. I will have a video to show you how I defeated the troll with the Goemancy build by playing Goemancy, not doing just runic boulders and stone armor and whacking him to death, by actually using the actual tree. But I can tell you right away, this is the funnest build that I've played. It's just amazing. The moment that you're gonna hit Earthquake, it's where things gonna get funny. Because Earthquake reduce their control resistance to the enemy and their movement resistance, so they always gonna get stunned, and that stun's gonna stand forever, and they're gonna get damage, and you're gonna smack them between a runic boulder, and then you're gonna corner them inside of a stone spike, and then you're gonna launch the Earthquake on them, and then you're gonna keep spamming them with runic boulder, and you're just gonna stun everything and damage everything. It's gonna be amazing. I will add one extra note. I didn't mention that for Pyromancy because actually Pyromancy actually doesn't require that. The thing that sucks when you play a Pyromancer or a Geomancer character is that for the 4th level book, you can only find them in dungeons. You cannot buy this book, you need to find them. And it kind of sucks to try to complete a build by sheer luck. On my stream, I've spent like 5 hours redoing a quest over and over that has a high amount of books, and I know that there were mages inside that could drop me the book and so forth, and I just never got it. Never got it. It's just like sheer random lucks when you get it. However, the game is kind of a troll because every time you're gonna play a melee character, they're gonna drop you a Geomancy book level 4 and a Pyromancy book level 4 when you actually don't need it. But when you play the actual class, you're never gonna see it. I'm gonna tell you something. There's a way that you can cheat to get the book. Just search on the internet. You're gonna find some posts on Steam. Basically what you do is that you go into your character's save files and you change an item names to replace it with the Geomancy book level 4. The reason why I'm telling you that is because if you don't have the Geomancy book level 4, it means that you will not have Runic Explosion and you will not have Boulder Toss, because these 2 skills, actually it's mentioned here. See, Boulder Toss, Runic Explosion, this skill and this skill require the book level 4. And if you don't have these, you're not going to be able to kill the troll by doing only Goemancy skills. You're gonna have to cheese your way by smacking him with your staff and using the stone armor with Runic Boulder. And that's it for today's video. I hope you find this helpful. I hope that you actually like it. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to have more information in regards to StoneShard, just look at the description down below. I have the tips and tricks video that I've mentioned, and I have this video that you just watched, and also I will have a series of combat tutorial versus the troll with all of the builds that I've tried in the game and succeeded to kill the troll with them. So thank you very much. You are appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Means the world to me. And see you next time.